Across the Pond Golf Podcast, a discussion about performance and enjoyment in golf and life.
All right, well, welcome to episode 3 of Across the Pond Golf Podcast. Today's guest, Mr. Paul Horton. Paul, how's it going today?
Pretty good. I'm down in Phoenix, Arizona, up in Scottsdale, here for another week, and the weather just reminds me of Vancouver, so you'll be, I guess, not feeling too envious today. And
yeah.
It's been nice to play some golf and get out and enjoy the sun, but we got a little cold and rain today, but I won't rub it in because we could still play.
That's the truth for sure. So first thing I wanted to ask, so we got on your email, CPGA, TPI, CGIFI, CGCA, PGA Tour coach, certified Aimpoint, PGA Canada National Teacher of the Year, National Teacher of the Year again, top 50 elite junior golf coaches in the US. Is there anything you haven't done with golf?
I think there's too many initials there.
Yeah, are there any letters left in the alphabet not after your name?
Not attached to you.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed the journey. This will be my 41st season coaching golf, and I started teaching full time in '94, but turned pro in '81, and taught a little bit. Enjoyed teaching, and we'll get into some more details of that later, maybe. But it's been a great journey for me, and fortunate to get some accolades and win some awards throughout those years. So
that's awesome. Well, yeah, definitely. I've had the pleasure of working with you before in the past, and I think one of the things where I kind of wanted to start us off, because I do remember the first lesson I ever had with you, and it was pretty descriptive in setting a plan in place for like what I was trying to do, and then where you could help me. So the first thing I definitely wanted to ask you is, like, when you get a player, whether they're an aspiring professional, a 10 handicap, a 20 handicap, you worked with the PGA Tour players, like, how does that process actually go? Is it different for like the player? Is it kind of what they set for their goals? And maybe I'll just let you with your process when you get a player coming to you.
Yeah, I think there's the process is very similar, whether they're a high handicap, a 20 handicap, or a 10, or a competitive junior player, amateur, or professional. The process is much the same, but there's a pretty in-depth, detailed interview that I go through, which you experience some of, in terms of me getting to know the player, getting to know the person, and a little bit more about their personal background, and not just golf, but what their family's like, that kind of thing, and dive into some of their golf issues and where they feel their strengths and weaknesses are, and then through some observation and assessment, I can sort of deduce whether those assessments are true or not, and basically to devise a plan for a player. It depends on the where the game might be at that point in time, and where they want to take it to, and then how much time do they have to commit to that process. And then it's, most of my programs, all of my students are on long-term coaching programs, and it's sitting down and mapping out the program, and it's not set in stone. So what's set is malleable, where you can kind of massage the program if necessary, right? At the end of the day.
Paul,
yes.
When, just a couple of questions on that stuff. Firstly, how often do you come across a player that actually has a good awareness of their strengths and weaknesses? Because I know in our experience, we're all pretty rubbish at determining what we're good and bad at. Mm-hmm. And also with regards to the you say a long-term plan, sort of how long would you say you would need realistically? Because we all want to get better seemingly overnight, but but how often, in your experience, would you say you actually need to get to a point at the outset? You say, I want to reduce my handicap by 15 strokes, or I want to get on the Canadian Tour in 3 years. You know, what sort of timelines are you looking at there?
I think it's every player is different. And, I look initially at sort of a 1 year process, and then it might evolve into 2 or 3 or 5 years. I had a new player come over. This was maybe 10 years ago, that he was a professional soccer player or football player in Poland, and came back over to Canada, never played golf, and he wanted to shoot in the 70s. And we sat down and we made a 5-year plan. And we started in year one, and at the end of 5 years, he's now shooting in the mid 70s, and quite happy. But it varies from player to player, and the assessments on where players find their strengths and weaknesses might be hard for me to initially fully assess until I actually see them play, and get some more data and more information as to, where should the focus be for that player, right? And the swing is just one piece of the puzzle, as you know. As a player aspiring, it's an important piece, but it's not the only piece by any stretch. So
there are a lot of pieces, and I think certainly from my experience, I think we're transitioning away from this now, but for the last sort of 20 years or so, there was so much focus on the swing and technique, and having an aesthetically pleasing swing. The rest of the game, the performance aspect, was completely neglected, by a lot of coaches.
Yes, I would agree with that. So I was at fault years ago where, we got stuck on cause and effect, which is one step to mastery, is understanding, what makes the ball do what it does. And really it's just the first step, and you need to go beyond that. And so one of my tagline in my logo is master your game, not just your swing. So it's getting the player to understand that in a lot of cases, the swing, you get it to a point where there's always something that you can tweak or nitpick about. But in the end, you got to get out and play. And so what I do with players, I'm mindful of their tournament schedule. And if they've got something upcoming, there's certain things I avoid in terms of coaching. The technical side, it needs to be more simplified and more game-like training and that kind of thing. So just getting them prepared to play.
And say you've got, let's say you've got a player on tour, whether it's PGA Tour, Canadian Tour, or whatever, and you've got a tournament or a stretch of tournaments coming up. So you've got 3 events in a row. They've got 2 weeks off preparation before that. How would you go about getting them ready for that stretch? And then how would you maintain their performance during that stretch? Because there's going to be limited time, obviously, while they're traveling. And for the amateurs as well, there's limited time where they're at work during the week. So we can obviously sort of maybe correlate the two. But yeah, sort of how would you go about preparing your players for a stretch of events?
Great question. I think, if you got 2 weeks leading up to that stretch, it's before you go away, you want to be ready to play and not play golf and not golf swing. So it would depend on the player if and what technical stuff we would do leading up, making sure that you've got a go-to shot, whether it's a tee shot or something that you can play when the chips are down, the pressure's on. So I remember a friend of mine talking with Jack Nicklaus years ago, and on the 72nd hole at Augusta Sunday afternoon with the front left pin. He says, you got a 7-iron into the green. What are you going to hit? And he said, I'm going to hit a fade. He said on Thursday I might hit a draw, but on Sunday when the chips are down, that the shot begs for a draw, and he's going to hit fade. So that kind of stuck with me. Just getting players prepared to trust their go-to shot, and not try to do too much. Take what the situation gives you. I would have a lot more focus likely on short game, and really more deliberate practice. The player needs to have more deliberate practice where you can quantify success, so you're not just hitting balls, you're doing a drill or playing a game where you can actually score it and test yourself, and then raise the bar, raise the level of pressure, so that, because you're only as strong as your weakest link, and once that link is broken, then things fall apart. And so I would be trying to strengthen that weak link.
So I'd like to touch on that too, because not just for say super competitive players, but even in Calgary, you've got a 5 or 6 month season, right?
Yep.
So for a lot of people, let's say it's a 5 handicap, a 10 handicap, that are still pretty good players and they're competitive. Let's say that they're going to play in their club championships, and like James said, you got someone that's still working, right? They're working a 40-hour week, but they got this weekend coming up where they're going to play 2 or 3 rounds straight, and it's going to be competitive. You got to putt everything out, and something that maybe they're not as used to. How would you get that person something like a week going up to get ready for that type of situation? Because you work with guys that are at the top of the game in the world or in Canada as well, but you also work with guys or women that are wanting to be competitive, say that 1 week of the year. And how would you go about that with them, knowing that they don't have a whole lot of time? Maybe if it's just a couple practice sessions or a 9 holes after work.
Yeah, there would be very little technical stuff. It would be very simple if we did get into technique, but I would do on-course stuff. I'm fortunate at the place I'm at Heritage Pointe, where we've got a 3-hole practice course. So there's a par 5, par 3, par 4, as you know, Chris. And
I would never take Paul would always tell me, okay, hit on this line that'll cut. And I would never do it because it literally looks like you're just going to hit it into the range. And as far as trust goes, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
On the first hole.
So much can change on the golf course where, alignment for players on the range can be somewhat adequate. And you get out in the golf course and it's horrendous. And but it's just getting the player to feel more comfortable in the game environment, and then trying to raise the level of pressure to see if they can handle it, right? And ultimately, whether it's club championships or PGA Tour, you need to want the ball. If we had a shot from 150 yards in and the goal was to get it inside a certain target range, inside 10 feet or 20 feet or whatever it might be, and we had a bet between you and I, you need to want the ball and say, I got this, or you have the option to give me the shot and I'll take the challenge and take the risk, right? So and
as a neutral, I know who my money's on.
Yeah, fair enough.
A lot of short game focus, right? That's where if your short game's on, you're going to be able to salvage, and just understanding the player and their mind and emotional elements that go to it. And there's a lot of anxiety that players get, which is a whole beast in itself, and a variety of different anxiety issues that pop up with competitive players, from young kids to tour pros, right? And it's just building their confidence that, hey, they can play, and it's not worrying about the outcome. It's going through the process, right? Just do the process and take what you get. I mean, it sounds simple, but and it is in some respects, but we make it too complicated. So,
but it takes a lot of work as well, doesn't it, Paul? You know, you can't expect to lose any anxiety overnight. And I mean, my coach always says, you know, you need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and embrace that, and just say, you know, like it's very much a part of playing. Sometimes you'll feel like that, you know, you're not going to even make contact with the ball, and then other times you'll feel perfectly relaxed and kind of that there you go, and you're in the right spot. But it's being able to deal with that on a daily basis, so that when you get in the arena, you kind of know exactly what to expect, and you can sort of been preparing for that, so to speak.
Yeah, I think if you talk to the top players in the world, they love that feeling of the back nine on Sunday, and they're in the chase for the title, and they're nervous and they like it, and they're uncertain maybe as to what's going to pan out, but that's why they play, right? They play because of that. They get the competitive juices flowing, and that heightens their performance in most cases at the highest level. And the players that kind of shy away from, I don't like the feeling inside, it makes it much harder for sure. And it can be dramatic from, like, have I ever played this game before, to, wow, that's magical, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's not just at the highest level of the game, is it? You know, it's like we say, the weekend warriors, they turn up the first tee, and they haven't hit a ball yet. You know, a lot of guys, I know in this country, a lot of guys just turn up and they'll shoot the breeze on the first tee, and then walk straight up, and a couple of practice swings, and then they're shaking like a leaf, and then they wonder why they haven't hit it down the middle. You know, and they sort of, they don't understand why they are nervous or anxious, but that happens to the best players in the world every single round at some point.
Yes, it does. Yeah. So it's you know, for the average player or the newer player, you know, the first tee jitters and whatnot, you really want to have the mentality of showing off, like have that inner cockiness, and let's, you know, like a little kid who, you know, wants to show their parents, you know, watch this, and if they miss the ball, it doesn't matter. They go back and they're quickly into the next one. Watch this one, right? So, you know, easier said than done, but you want to have the mentality of, let me show you what I've got, show you my best, and as opposed to just trying to, you know, hit the ball and blend in with the scenery and disappear into the sunset, right, as you go play.
And I think you said something there, that if it doesn't come off, it doesn't matter. And I think that the top players in any arena, I mean, even in the business world or anything like that, they're not afraid to miss the shot, so to speak. And I mean, Michael Jordan is heavily sort of, you know, regarded as being one of the most clutch players of all time in basketball, but he also missed more shots than anyone else. But that quickly gets forgotten, doesn't it? You know, have to be
willing. Mention them, because I was thinking of, as soon as you said that, before you said Michael Jordan, that's who I was thinking of.
Yeah.
And I forget the numbers, but he quotes that I had this many opportunities for game-winning shots, and I failed, and I failed, and I failed, and yet he's known for Mr. Clutch and maybe the best of all time. And so it's, if you don't fail, you're not learning, right? You can't succeed without failure. So you need to fail and then fail better and until you gain a little more confidence. And, you know, Michael still wanted the ball at the end of the game. Give me the ball. I got this, even though he had failed several times before. But he turned that around.
And I think he realised that it doesn't matter if you miss. You know, the world will keep spinning, and life will go on, and you can take your chance next time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I wanted to go back to one thing actually at the start that Paul mentioned. So Paul, you've been in the game for, well, teaching as a professional, you said 41 years, right?
Yep.
So like from that point to now, like as far as your beliefs, your philosophy towards getting people better, and even like what you've seen in the game, like what do you think's changed the most over that period of time for yourself?
That's a good question. Lots has changed, like lots. And I feel I'm a better teacher this year than I was last year and 5 years ago. And if I look back to the beginning, oh my God, right? I want to give the money back, but
it's amazing how many coaches at the top level say that. I owe everyone a refund for the first 10 years.
When I was young, it was all about spewing out knowledge of all this information I knew, and the more you know, the more you realize that you don't know, and there's so much to learn, and it never stops learning, and so the journey never ends, and it's you never get to the top of the mountain. So because on the other side of the mountain is downhill. So I mean, goal setting, you need to keep resetting goals if you're reaching your goal, so you don't tip over the other side of the mountain. But I would say I spent a lot of time and money investing in myself over the years, and just getting more knowledgeable and smarter on all aspects, not just in golf, but things outside of golf that have helped my coaching. One of the, I remember back in the mid 90s, so 94, 95, I spent $25,000 on a video system, which after paying it off after 2 years, it was worthless because of the computer technology. So whereas a launch monitor that might cost the same amount, would have some more value to it than my system was basically obsolete at that point in time. But back then it's I said if I'm in the game, I got to get in the game. And so people came to me back then because I had this system, which I use my iPhone for now, in a free app or a $5 app, whatever. So, one of the big things, a game changer for me, was taking Aimpoint, the Aimpoint green reading, which I took that in 2011. And, I think it's a game changer throughout the industry in terms of how easy it is for players to learn, and anybody at any level can learn it. So that's been a big part of my coaching, especially on the short game side, on the putting side. And I do a lot more putting coaching than I ever used to. And it's obviously a huge part of the game, a huge part of your scoring. So I would say that that's changed. The knowledge and the abilities are always evolving and hopefully improving, but the underlying principles that I would abide by are simple laws of physics, and those haven't changed. So until they change the laws of physics, I probably won't change my principles. But I coach the player and not a methodology. So I'm coaching the individual in front of me, and I'm coaching the person, how to play better golf. So I'm not coaching how to play better golf. I'm coaching that person to play better golf. So it's getting to understand that player and just understanding how they work, how they learn. And I think there's more learning styles out there than there are people on earth. So I never subscribe to the three levels of, or the 3 levels of learning, or the three scenarios of how people learn, whether they're visual, audio, or kinesthetic, that kind of thing. So, I don't get into that. I just understand who I'm working with, and try to adapt and apply what I've learned to help them along the way. So lots have changed, and yet the underlying core principles stay the same.
How do you think that, obviously discussing technology, how do you think that, say, YouTube has influenced your students? Because there's so much information out there now. Are they coming to you and saying, oh, well, this guy said this, so I want to do this, and you're saying, well, no, that's not how I see it, and are you having more of a battle now with your students as far as getting your message across to them, and obviously getting that player to do the best things for them? Because it's easy to watch obviously other people on YouTube, but it's harder to understand what you need to do personally, isn't it?
Yeah, there's so much on YouTube, and there's plenty of students that watch too much YouTube, and so it's I guess understanding the player's beliefs, and if those beliefs need altering, in my opinion, then we need to alter those beliefs or get on the same page, or it doesn't work. And so we walk through those beliefs wherever I might question the belief, and make sure that what we're doing makes sense to the player. Because if it doesn't make sense, there's no point in moving on. And once that makes sense, it can really be an eye opener to the student and accelerate the learning process. It's I lost my train of thought in terms of where I wanted to go with this, but
that's okay.
YouTube is there's so much there, and really there's a lack of awareness as a general statement for players. They don't have awareness, self-awareness.
Yeah.
And there's blind spots in your swing, blind spots being where you might not know where things are at, or, and so you need to become more self-aware and dive in a little deeper. So deeper practice, meaning if you're working on something and you're trying to assess your personal awareness of whatever it might be, then you need to go deeper and deeper and deeper into that awareness until you own it. And just because you hit a few successful shots, you don't own it.
Yeah.
You need to, can you own it on the practice tee, and can you own it on the course, and can you own it under pressure, and try to keep raising the level of pressure so that you're trying to strengthen the links in the game, right?
Yeah, well, we spoke about this yesterday, didn't we, Chris, with the magical "I've got it,"
God. Yeah.
and how quickly we mislead ourselves.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think I can attest to working with Paul, and I think one of the great things right off the bat, you asked me, what do you want to do as far as your game goes, and you start there, and then what do you want to do as far as hitting the golf ball, and letting the player kind of empower that, and then helping them along. And that's a great place to start with people, right? Mm-hmm. In the sense, do you want to hit a draw? Do you want to hit a fade? Are you trying to get more power? And just being objective in figuring out what they want. And also, like you said, just put it you've said it multiple times, putting a plan in place to make that kind of happen for them. And I think you do a great job of that, and obviously building that player up and letting them kind of choose, but at the same time, okay, you need to stay in parameters. It's like you said, learning styles, there's hundreds, maybe more, thousands, right? And there's also, there's not just that, there's a player, there's so many different ways to swing the golf club, and a lot of the stuff as far as what the body goes through. I definitely want to get into that. Also, we wanted to definitely ask, the launch monitors. James kind of touched upon the YouTube, say launch monitors and players dependency on those things now. How do you go about dealing with that part of it? Because it's a huge portion of information for people, and it can help people get a lot better. But at what point do you kind of stop that with a player and start to take the reins?
Yeah, I've got students with their own launch monitors that spend all this money and bring it to the range, and I have to stop them fairly quickly. We might have a session or two, but they get too much into the numbers. I think the launch monitors, they're awesome, fantastic, and they tell us lots, and they would be essential for club fitters. I'm more about getting the player on the golf course, and I think as a coaching generality, we're getting too much into becoming biomechanists instead of skill acquisition experts, right? That's where people need to, and I think that's where it needs to head. The technology is great, and I use it as a second layer underneath the human element. So I use it if I need it to figure something out or to find out. So I'm not guessing at something, but there's a few people that I know that have taught a long time that are very skilled at what they do, and that could sort of maybe tell you what these numbers might be without a launch monitor, right? And the ball flight's going to tell you most of what you need to know, but if you're fitting a player for a driver, for example, there needs to be that technology so you get accurate feedback. But too much is a detriment, right? It can be dangerous. So, and that's the same with whether it's a launch monitor or too much YouTube. Players get confused and whatnot. There's a ton of fantastic technology out there that is really, I think, helped us become better coaches. But you don't want to rely on the technology, and you don't want to have the technology run you as a player or a coach. So I would use it as a second layer underneath that human element. So
yeah, and the golf ball, it's not going to lie to you, is it? You can, if you pay attention to what it's doing, you can pretty much identify what the issues are. I'd like to know your take on say with TrackMan. I don't know what the other launch monitors have, but with sort of combine tests and the performance center, how useful you think that is, playing those games rather than just obsessing over numbers, or would you prefer to just see that sort of practice on a golf course?
I think ultimately I'd rather see it on the golf course under less controlled environments. So I have an indoor studio that Chris is aware of, and it's got a full track.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
With all the cameras, and there's wedge testing and par 5 testing and combine, and had my son a few years ago went through the combine and didn't do very well on the wedges, but had a overall score 85, which is
good going,
maybe higher than the tour average. Yeah. 85 is a great score, but that doesn't necessarily mean that player can play, right? Obviously they have skill and whatnot, but there's so many other factors involved. So yes, it's the combine and the testing is good because it's a level where you have to perform and you get graded on it, and then if you were taking out you two guys together and you were on the golf course and we had a wedge test or some type of game, now you guys are competing against each other in whatever the environment presents, right?
Yeah.
I think like what you mentioned earlier with Heritage Pointe, like you do have like a good facility there too, where you can get players out for say 3 holes, right? Yeah. Our buddy Jacob Tilton that was on last time does, he said like one of the big things he likes to do is get players on the course. Now he's down in Atlanta, Georgia, and I don't think from what we took, it's very busy. So he's got that opportunity to get people out on the course. Whereas in Canada, as we know, the tee sheet could be like swamped from 7 a.m. till 5 p.m. So it makes it a lot harder, but I know for you have the 3-hole course that you can get a player out, and like 3 holes, if you have an hour lesson, I mean, that could be 30 minutes and then you can go back onto the range and check some things. But where I'm kind of going with this one is, do you think that getting like from coaching, one of the big areas that is missing would be watching your player on the golf course?
Yeah, there's no question about it. You know, in one of my focal groups I set up back in 2009 was competitive juniors. And, you know, I would coach these juniors, and I was so busy at the time prior to changing my focal groups. You know, I was busy, you know, and booked several weeks in advance. But when I started working with these juniors, and they would come back and say, well, I shot this. I said, well, how can you shoot that? Right? It's as good as they are, right? And you go, there's no way. And you go out and watch them play. And, you know, I had my son, who was a college player, you know, went through all the junior tournaments. So I had a vested interest to go out and watch, but I was the only coach at many of these events where, you know, I'm watching these kids play, and it's you understand why they shoot what they shoot, because of the, you know, the poor decisions they make and everything else. And so it's essential to see them not just play while I'm coaching them, but to see them play in competition, to see how they handle themselves, their self-management and mental toughness, how they handle adversity. You know, a lot of college coaches are watching these junior events, these high-profile junior events, and they're not necessarily looking at, you know, how good they are, but how do they handle coming off a double bogey, or, you know, it's a little bit more than just, you know, your talent. Right?
Or even, why did they make that double bogey?
Yes. So is it a poor decision? Is it poor execution? Mismanagement? Right? There's all kinds of factors. And, you know, when I go out on what we call the loop, that 3-hole practice course, it might just be to hit pitch shots from inside 80 yards. It might be situational play where we're putting them in a situation that's not flat. You know, they're in the rough, they're on a hill, or it might be 2 or 3 or 4 players together saying, well, you know, James, you got a 1-hole, you're 1 up with 3 to play. Can you hold the lead? And Chris is coming from behind, or Chris is 2 up, and can you close the gap? Those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
Where and you can't get that on the practice tee.
And how would you go about getting a student to maybe gain more awareness of their decision making and their course management? Because, I mean, certainly for myself, that's been an enormous factor of rapid improvement. You know, forget the skill acquisition, just by making better decisions, by realizing that you don't have to hit everything to 3 feet, and you don't have to hit driver 300 yards down the middle every single time in order to shoot a good score.
Yes.
You know, it's amazing how quickly you can lower your score without gaining any skills. But how would you go about getting your students to sort of develop the course management side of their game?
Yeah, I think, you know, that they have to enjoy bogey avoidance versus making birdies. You know, the difference between you know, an 85 shooter and a 75 is it's about 1 birdie. That's all. But it's most of the players that struggle. There's too many bogeys and doubles and others that train wrecks that destroy the round, and you've got to learn how to manage it and deal with the adversity, right? So so every player is different in terms of their emotional aspect and the strategies that might best work for that player, and understanding that there's a math formula that you could devise on, should I go for it or should I lay up? There's a math equation for that, and it would give you a percentage based on your skill set, right? But, you know, and if you don't make it and the word choke comes up often, and, you know, the question would be, are you good enough to choke, right? Have you got a good enough, is your skill good enough where what was classified as a choke? or was it just because your skill wasn't high enough? Right now, I use this water bottle. It's a clear water bottle with 100 marbles in it. Right, there's 50 white marbles, there's 25 gold and 25 black, and the black marbles represent a poorer than average shot for that skill set player. The gold ones represent a better than average shot, and the 50 white ones are average shots. And so you shake up the jar, and you know, marble pops out, and what color is it? So there's a bit of luck involved with golf in terms of what marbles are coming out. Now, so I use that a lot in my coaching, and if you know, I had one kid, you know, quick story, that our last hole on our course is it's a short par 5 to an island green, and this kid had 230 yards into the island green, and in my opinion, he had no chance. He had a very slim chance to you know, hit his 3-wood on the green.
Yeah.
And so I let him hit his 3-wood, and he hit it in the water. And I held up the jar. I said, "How many marbles in this jar could get you to where you needed to go?" And he thought about it, and he said, "Probably 2." I said, "So you got a 2% chance of getting on the green." So I said, "You know, what does that tell you? What are you going to do next time?" And they said, "Oh, I'm going for it." Right? There's 2 in there. Right? He didn't get it at the time.
The whole tin cup mentality.
So, you know, Jack Nicklaus's rule of thumb was, if you could pull it off 7 out of 10 times, then play the percentages. But it depends on your situation, obviously, right? If all you need is 5 to, you know, to win the tournament, right? Then, you know, maybe it's not a good thing to go for it, right?
Well, I remember Tiger did that. Oh, crikey! It must have been.
Yeah,
that's it. Yeah, and he turned a par 4 into a 3-shotter, hit a 4-iron off the tee or something, and laid up, but it got the job done.
Yeah. So, you know, situation dictates, and I think you mentioned the comment earlier, James, where you said you got to embrace the moment. Really, it's if you're in a high pressure situation, and whether it's club championships or the U.S. Open, or the Open, and you've got a 3-4 foot putt to win the Open, you can't not imagine, like you can't not imagine not being there with all those people. I mean, so you have to embrace the moment as opposed to pretending you're off in some quiet space, right? It's enjoy the moment, enjoy it, embrace it, and really not focus on the outcome again. It's focusing on, hey, I'm going to trust my line and give it a good roll, and I'm going to take what I get. And good things happen.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you're in that position, you've done well to get there. You know, if you must be playing well in order to be in a situation where you feel nervous, because the outcome of the tournament is kind of resting on this last hole or this last putt or whatever. So I think you need to remind yourself that, hey, I'm doing pretty good here now to get here, and like you say, just let the cards fall how they fall.
Yeah, take what you get, right? And
absolutely,
you know, it what goes around comes around. So it'll
And I think I've been reading lately on some romanticism sort of philosophy and how it has affected us, and I think there are remnants of that in golf. Like I mean, the marble analogy was fantastic. I really like that one, Paul. So I'm going to steal that one. But I think we live in a world now where, you know, people don't want to see someone laying up, because I mean, Zach Johnson, the flack that he got for laying up at Augusta when he won, and everyone was questioning his decisions. But you know, we all want to see this fantastic shot over water, or the flamboyant sort of Seve Ballesteros shot out of the trees. But most often that's not the one that you should be choosing.
Yeah, and I think even like going with back, I love the marble one too. Like Zach Johnson's a great example, someone that knows what they do well, right? You look at Augusta this year, and for sure Bryson probably had more black marbles than he would have gold or white, right? Usually. But someone like Bernhard that played with him ended up beating him in the tournament. I mean, there's a guy too that's probably maximizing what he does well, being 65 or whatever Bernhard is, and like being able to beat probably one of the best players, if the most explosive player in the world for sure, on that golf course. And I think with the marble analogy too, like you've got in golf a handicap system, and if someone shows up and they say I'm a 3 handicap or I'm a 4 handicap, it's not that they're averaging 75. It's kind of taking your potential and like optimizing that, right? More often than not, they're probably going to shoot between 75 and 80, and they come off the course and they shoot 80 and they're frustrated. But like you've kind of said, you're going to shoot more times in between that range versus say shooting a 73 to 75. And I think having like that understanding so that, when it's a day that's going good, keep it going. But as well, understanding that you're going to have those days where you're going to shoot 80 and like not slamming the trunk when you get off the golf course.
Yeah, we did a study years ago on a 6 handicap. And if you ask a typical 6 handicap, what do you think you'll shoot today? They'll say 78, par 72, etc. And, in this case study we did, the average score, the mean average was 82. So that in their last 20 games, they had 4 scores of 82, and they had 8 scores higher than 82 and 8 scores lower. And so they have a 50% chance of shooting higher or lower than 82. But so their expectations are out of line. And if they shot 85, for example, they might need to use plastic utensils for dinner, right? So they don't hurt themselves. But, so it's understanding that, that 6 handicap is going to shoot 75 once in a while. And they would be unhappy if they shot 78 or higher kind of thing. So it's all relative, right? And so the handicap's based on your better scores of your last 20 kind of thing. So anyway, so it's just understanding the expectations and really, going out and playing, and your best rounds come when you're clear-minded and there's no clutter. It feels easy, and golf is super easy when you're playing well, because it is, and it's super hard. It's the hardest thing out there when it's not going well, right? So
and it's the smallest of margins between the two,
And a lot of times it's a very thin line between being there in the right space mentally and not being there. So whether you feel clutter in your mind or just there's a lack of clarity, or your brain's going in multiple directions because you can't contain yourself kind of thing, or control what's going on, right? There's always questions that the mind that runs through your mind, and the questions, if you understand that they don't really mean anything. So there's a lot of weird things that run through a golfer's mind when they're getting ready to hit a shot, and I can speak from my own experience that as long as I acknowledge that, hey, it doesn't mean anything, let's get rid of that, and let's carry on here. Let's focus in on what we need to do here. So
I was just going to chime in on I think like for James and I, we both had it in our careers where maybe you shoot even or 1 over, 2 over, whatever it is, and you come off the golf course and you're mad because your expectation or your desire, your goal is to shoot something better. But if you don't really understand where you're starting from, like that 72 could have, like for myself, could have been a gold round, but if you're just basing on like your best, like you're going to really, I think, struggle from a mental health side of things. And you're always going to be frustrated getting off the golf course. You're never going to be kind of like satisfied. And I think that when you do have one of those gold rounds, and when you understand that it is one of those, like not necessarily celebrate, go, have beers for 6 hours, but appreciate it. Because if it's a good day. Yeah, I know, right? We've been there. But I think just appreciating when you get one of those good days, you first have to understand where you are, like you said in your guys' study for those 6 handicaps, that, you know, if they do shoot a 78, like that's a good day. Like enjoy that, you know, appreciate it, you know, after the round and whatnot, because there's going to be fewer of those than the ones that, you know, would be considered the white, right? Those average days. And then obviously you do have some of the black ones as well.
Yeah, I think important to understand that the marbles, everyone has 100 marbles and everybody has 50 white, 50, or 25 gold, 25 black. The numbers don't change. So, you know, you often have to improve your skill set to raise so that the marbles are better. They don't change color, but, you know, when Tiger Woods, you know, pulls out a black marble, what does that mean for him versus a 6 handicap?
It's still a 68 for Tiger.
Yeah. He might drive it up, right?
Yeah.
But you know, maybe he makes par with the black marble, and you know the 6 handicaps making a double. It just depends, right? But and over the course of the day, you might have, you know, a little more than 25% gold pop out if you have a good day, but over 1,000 rounds, it's, you know, they're all going to even out. Right?
Yeah,
so,
and I think certainly at the mini tour level, perhaps at sort of PGA Tour, you know, expectations are perhaps managed a little better. Maybe not, but you know, certainly mini tour, you've got guys that are exactly that. You know, that they're on a good day, it would be, you know, maybe 5 or 6 under on a very good day, but on a white day, it would be maybe 73, 74. And these guys are going home disappointed when they walk away and they've, you know, if there's a field of 100 people, they've finished 40th or 50th, and they're disappointed week in, week out. And I would certainly say that I've been in that group. And then you'll have one good week and you maybe finish top 5, and then, you know, it sort of builds your hopes up, but the next week you're right back down to, you know, 30th or 40th again. And even at the top levels, managing those expectations, I think, is crucial. Like as Chris said, for mental health, but for improvement, because you are just laying the next step and the next foundation to keep getting better week in, week out.
Yeah, and I think so. Well, we'll kind of finish it up here. We had one last one we definitely wanted to ask you, Paul, and I think this is a great kind of place to go from. So, like with golf, obviously you've based your career off of the game. You've been in the game for more than 40 years, I'm sure, as far as playing. Like, what was it from a passion standpoint that, like, you know, drew you in to pursue it and then build an entire career off of it?
Yeah, great question. You know, back in the early days when I was younger, I was into a lot of heavy into hockey and soccer, or football, as James might call it. Playing both sports at a fairly high level and fairly intense, you know, 6-day-a-week sports. And I got introduced to golf when I was about 14. My dad got me introduced to it, and I played once or twice as a 14, 15-year-old, and then I got hooked on it when I was 16. I got the bug and you know, tried to. I basically moved everything over to golf, and I eventually left the other sports a year later and managed to get fairly good at golf fairly quickly. I found it in the dirt, basically, as some other pros have said, and you know, so I didn't know what I wanted to do. Back in high school, I remember I was very keen on architecture and golf course architecture, and I remember routing plans for holes and golf courses in a drafting class in high school, and I knew what psyche did to players in terms of how you lay out a hole, and I was writing you know, sports performance essays on golf and the mental side in high school, right? And so my dad was a psychologist, and I got into the psychology of golf at that point in time, and or at least enjoyed that aspect of it. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, and I took a year's worth of general commerce courses at university, and decided my goal at that point was to do a year of commerce and then 4 years of landscape architecture, leading into a 2-year golf course architecture program in Texas. And after 1 year, I decided to turn pro at a young age. I was asked to turn pro a few years prior to that, and I gave myself 10 years to become a club pro or a head pro. And on my 10th year, I became a head pro. And it was cool. The first head pro position I got was in Calgary, and the course was just being built. So I got to see the miles of pipe that go underneath the ground and all the intricacies of you know, I was more into the design and not you know, schooled on what goes underneath the ground and how it all works. But that was pretty cool for me. And as it turned out, I ended up I was a director of golf there and becoming more of a GM, you know, during my time there, and putting out a bunch of fires. And I did a lot of teaching as a club pro. And at that point, I was not enjoying the GM side of it. And I wanted to get out and teach and play and be with the people. So that's when I opened my own golf academy in 1994. And it's evolved since then. So my passions changed from the architecture to teaching. And I wasn't sure that I'd enjoy teaching 12 hours a day, every day, but turns out I did and still do. So, you know, I'm happy I made the switch, and the journey, again, it's a quest to, you know, how can we make this game easier to learn, teach, and master, right? Which is an endless journey, but a fun one.
Oh, I think that's a fascinating journey that you've had there, Paul.
Yeah.
I've also had the ability to, you know, I got coached by George Knutson. He was my first professional coach, and George was one of Canada's best players, and won 8 times on the tour, and had the opportunity to watch Mo Norman practice at our club in Toronto. So we had a secondary range that was secluded, and when I look back on those memories, it was pretty special to actually just me and Mo, and watching Mo hit balls, shag his own balls on this secondary range where it was just him and I. So some great memories for me. So
I'll jump in there quickly, Paul, and say for the UK listeners that shagging balls it means something entirely differently in Canada and the US than it would do over here.
Yes.
Just to clarify that.
That's good. No, it's been it sounds like it's been a great journey, and I think you got many more years ahead of you. So yeah, once again, from James and I, we really appreciate you coming on, and, you know, hopefully if we're still doing this down the road, we can get you on again and see where things are at.
Yeah, I'd love to do it. Enjoyed being on.
No,
Yeah,
thanks a lot, Paul. And you know, obviously anyone that's looking for lessons, you know, who we would definitely encourage them to come and see you. How can they find you, and where can they find you?
Yeah, they can just they can Google me. It's Paul Horton Golf is my website, so paulhortongolf.com. They can email me at paul@paulhortongolf.com, and my phone number they can find on if they email me or my website, they'll have access to that. So
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
Awesome.
brilliant.
Cheers,
Thanks
Paul.
ever so much for your time, Paul.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
Okay.